Good evening. I am so glad to see all of you. About 15 minutes ago, I looked at Rochelle and I was like, it's empty. And she said, oh, we're Catholic. They'll come. And you did. And we're so glad that you're here for the first of our summer talk series, which we are having every Thursday night. And we're alternating between our fabulous campuses. Tonight, it's our honor and privilege to have Bishop Rosazza. For some of you who don't know, he began his journey at St. Tim's or in this area. Yes, so this is home ground for him. He's traveled the world. The rumor is he speaks many, many languages. And he's very influential in the Hartford area. Bishop was ordained very young, so he's really got a mind for the church and what's happening. And I will say from a personal point of view, he gave the most beautiful Christmas Eve homily I think I've ever heard this year, so I was all teary, so thank you, Bishop.
Thank you.
So we are very excited to have him here for the first of our talk series. And when we're done, we have a special treat for this night only. We'll have a special treat after all of them, but this night only, we have Ben and Jerry's for all you good souls who came out. And there's a truck in the back, so when Bishop is finished, we invite you to come out to the back and enjoy some Ben & Jerry's with us. We are so glad to have you here. We're so glad that you're a part of the St. Timothy, St. Thomas Parish, and I hand it over to Bishop.
Thanks, Bishop. So let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. O God, you are my God, for you I long. For you, my soul is thirsting. My body pines for you like a dry, weary land without water. So I gaze on you in the sanctuary to see your strength and your glory. For your love is greater than life. Psalm 63. When I came back to St. Timothy's and Father Al was here, he said, and this is true, Bishop Peter lasted only 2 years, so we're going to give him another chance. So I was sent here to work with Father O'Neill, who built this beautiful facility, and then that was 1961 after I'd been ordained. So I stayed 2 years, and then Archbishop Moran appointed me to teach in the seminary, so that was the reason for the 2 years. So thanks a lot for coming. I was going to major in chemistry in college, and I spent 1 year at Dartmouth College where I enjoyed chemistry. Then also near the end of the school year, my chaplain, Father Bill Nolan, who was a wonderful priest, looked me in the eye and he said, Peter, do you want to be a priest? I said, I don't know it, Father Bill, I think I'd rather be a chemist. So at the end of the school year, I changed my mind and went to my parents and told them I wanted to study for the priesthood, so I ended up over St. Thomas here. Anyway, now tonight, faith and reason, faith and science, to show that it's reasonable to believe in God. There's no conflict between faith and science. And I'll start off easily with scientists who also believed in God. Well, this happened about 1890 in Paris, one of these horse-drawn trolleys at the time. And a young fellow who was getting his doctorate at the University of Paris in physics got on the trolley, and there was only one seat in the back, and next to this older man with a beret and a black coat, and he's got his rosary out, and he's praying his rosary. So the young fellow sat down and looked over and said, do you still believe in that? And he said, yes. Don't you know that science is going to explain away all of those beliefs and you don't need God anymore? Oh. So anyway, he went on, and then he left the trolley. The next week he came back, and the same thing. He sat next to this guy, and he said, I'm really going to overwhelm him. So he started talking about his thesis, and the older fellow understood everything. And he was surprised. But when he left the trolley, another gentleman followed him out. He said, you're very fortunate to engage that man in conversation. He hardly speaks to anybody. And who is that? Louis Pasteur. You've heard of Louis. If you haven't, just take a carton of milk, pasteurize, it's named after him. And he said, the more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. You know, and he's the one who discovered germs. You know, before his work, people didn't know how somebody got sick from another. You know, and then of course, Nicholas Copernicus, who was a priest in Poland way back, 1583. The father of genetics. Anybody know, probably there's a geneticist here. The father is Gregor Mendel. He was born in Austria, and he was a Benedictine monk. And he was the abbot, in other words, the head guy in Brno, B-R-N-O, in Slovakia. But he started working with peas, and he wrote all of his findings, and died. And 20 years after, somebody discovered his writings. You know, so he's the father of genetics. Now, Nicholas Steno, he was Danish born, he was a convert to Catholicism, he ended up being a bishop. He's the father of paleontology. So, in other words, working on fossils of animals and plants. Georges Lemaitre, Belgium. 2 doctorates, one in mathematics from Louvain University, where he was Belgian, and the other from MIT in astrophysics. He discovered the theory of the primeval atom, and it was Sir Fred Hoyle who belittled and insulted it by calling it the Big Bang. He later left atheism. Again, being able to put together science and faith. There's no contradiction. One of my heroes is Father Teilhard de Chardin, C-H-A-R-D-I-N, a Frenchman who died in New York State, but he was a member of the French Academy of Sciences. And to get into that academy, you have to be elected by your peers. So if one dies, you know, all of them get together and elect the next one. And he was in the group in China that discovered the Peking man. The Vatican Observatory was created by Pope Leo XIII in 1891. By the way, folks, we're not trying to hide things here, you know, put them under the rugs and fake it, not at all. It's now run by Brother Guy Consolmagno, who's an American PhD from MIT. Also, there are 34 craters on the moon named after Jesuits, plus 2 asteroids, you know. Christopher Clavius, C-L-A-V-I-U-S, he was German, died in 1612. One of the largest craters on the moon is named after him. And also he was a mathematician, he was in all these things, a Jesuit. He helped Pope Gregory XIII develop the calendar we have today, which is called the Gregorian calendar. Albert the Great was born about 1200 in Germany. He wrote on so much: logic, theology, botany, geography, astronomy, mineralogy, zoology, physiology, justice, law, friendship, and love. That's why they call him Albert the Great. He died in Cologne, Germany. There's this college in Hampton, Connecticut, or New Haven, Albertus Magnus. It's named after him. And then we have the great Saint Thomas Aquinas. He sought truth everywhere. He said, truth is truth. So he studied Aristotle and also Averroes, who was a Muslim scholar, but he was able to bring into his Summa Theologicae, the summary of theology, 7 books. I have a copy of it, all in Latin. But he used to bring all that truth together. So we have great people like that. Also, I have a brother who does, he taught at the University of Iowa Pharmacy School, do a lot of research, and he said, my research brings me closer to God. Again, that's balancing science and faith. Now, a scientist, as scientists, using the scientific method, must begin with the observation of matter. They can't tell you where the matter comes from. As men and women of faith, yes. Like Father Georges Lemaitre, combining science and faith. But they can't say, well, God doesn't exist and matter was always there. Where did it come from? Well, as a scientist, he can't tell you that. The scientific method has to start with something. Now, again, we're not trying to hide things here, folks. There is the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. It's an academy, independent body within the Holy See and enjoys freedom of research. The statutes of 1976 say, the Academy of Sciences has its goal the promotion of the progress of the mathematical, physical, and natural sciences and the study of related epistemological questions and issues. For instance, going even above how do you know that certain areas of science are valid? It was founded in 1936 by Pope Pius XI and has had a large number of full members who've been awarded a Nobel Prize. The number to 2018 is 43, including such names as Max Planck, died in 1947, Niels Bohr, was Danish, 1962, Paul Dirac, British, and so on. Oh, I was over there one time. We had a visit with Pope Benedict, and you just sit in the same residence where Pope Francis lives now. So you come down for breakfast, and I just joined these people at table, and I said to them in Italiane, 2 women, and they said, no, Polish. And they were there for a study on STEM research. And one had done her PhD at the University of Kansas, and the other one, I forget where, but they were both obviously brilliant. And they were invited for this symposium, so they always have those things going on too. It's a pretty high level. Now, Pope Francis, when he wrote the encyclical Laudato Si, those are words from St. Francis' Canticle of the Son, praise be the brother, son, and so on. And she pointed out it's necessary to dialogue with scientists. So this is evident in his encyclical, since his theological or moral insights are based on the science of climate change. You don't just go out in the dark and start. No, he consulted these great scientists from all over the world, and they came up with the idea of climate change. So he addresses the moral content of scientific and political issues. Moral content. You can't think of one issue that doesn't have moral content. Death penalty, it's sort of obvious. Even putting up a traffic light, is that just a political thing? No, it's a moral one too, because it takes away the possibility of people being hurt. It's a moral question. The secularists, by the way, would have religiously motivated people stay in their places of worship and not enter the public domain. Stay in your church, Pope Francis, the American bishop, stay in your dioceses and don't bother us. Now, certain proofs of the existence of God. This is a wonderful book, by the way. It's called The Soul's Upward Yearning, Clues to Our Transcendent Nature from Experience and Reason. It's Father Robert Spitzer, who's got a doctorate in physics, a Jesuit, and he was the president of Gonzaga University, great basketball school. But it's excellent, and a lot of things I'm saying tonight I've got from him. Anyway, he talks about this Dr. Eben Alexander and his NDE, near-death experience. And the doctor concluded from his experience, through which he was monitored by an EEG, electrocardiogram, that consciousness does not originate from the brain, but comes from a spiritual entity that channels its activity through the brain. That's what we believe, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that we have this material body, part of us. We also have a soul, a spiritual. And we're made in God's image and likeness. If we're made in God's image and likeness, we can't be just matter. It has to be something more than that. So other people have had these experiences, and even blind people, they can see, even if the heart stops. There's no brain functioning, but yet they're alive. Then they come back into themselves. There are thousands of these cases. And, you can go online and find that, or you can take a book like this. Plato, about God's existence. Perfect justice. Now, even children have a sense of justice. It isn't fair, as we cry out often. But where does this sense of perfect justice come from? From the world? No, since we see injustice around us at all times. It's got to come from outside, from God. It must, from a source that we can call God. So we're going into area trying to show that it's reasonable to believe in God. You have Thomas Aquinas. It's a little complicated, but there has to be one uncaused cause, so something created the universe. And there's an infinite number of people. Well, wait a minute. Take a pool table. Somebody hits the cue ball, and the cue ball hits other balls, and the other balls hit other balls, and so on, and they fall into pockets. Okay, so you have a cause, the person who's shooting. Then you have the cue ball and all these others. Well, it's the same in the world, and ultimately you come back to an uncaused cause. In other words, who's always there. And there are several others of these. I'll just throw this out. There's essence in existence. I exist, but I can die. A horse exists. The horse can die. A rock exists. It'll wear out, But you have to come to somebody whose essence is to exist. So in other words, God. Essence and existence are the same in God. I don't know if that's, anyway. Now, the importance of the sacred in the lives of humans. The absence of sacred in modern, non-religious people introduces a heightened anxiety about existence and meaning. What gives our life meaning? Religious people have a level of sacred meaning, hope, happiness, dignity, and destiny that modern non-religious people have implicitly or explicitly denied. That's from Mercia Elena, 1986, a Romanian. He taught at the University of Chicago. He was a leading interpreter of religious experience. And it sums this up, Pope Francis. Don't ask me, who am I, but rather, for whom am I? You know, to give love isn't love until you give it away. Remember from Sound of Music? That's how I become more human. And Augustine, you have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts will never rest until they rest in you. You know? Could the universe, this is funny, could the universe have come into existence by chance? You can see this book. This Hoyle, the one who belittled calling Big Bang Theory, but who converted, became a believer, compared this to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a 747. And Einstein, from this book, which is beautiful too, by a scientist, I heard him speak at Yale, God's universe, and he says, Einstein, the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, is as good as dead. A knowledge of the existence of something we cannot penetrate, our perceptions of the profoundest reason and the most radiant beauty. It is this knowledge and this emotion that constitute true religiosity. You know, you've had those experiences. You go at the seashore when the sun is going down. There's something awesome there. Or you drive through New England in October with the changing of the leaves. And also, some of you probably have had to see your child born. What an awesome experience. I had that experience at St. Raphael Hospital, you know, to see a child born. Wow. You know. So, objection. Religious people commit terrorist acts in the name of their religious beliefs. Pope Francis got together with the Grand Imam of Saudi Arabia, and they came up with this statement. It's called Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together. In the response, terrorism is deplorable and threatens the security of people, be they in the east or the west, the north or the south, and disseminates panic, terror, pessimism. But this is not due religion. It is due rather to an accumulation of incorrect interpretations of religious texts and to policies linked to hunger, poverty, injustice, oppression, and pride. This is why it's so necessary to stop supporting terrorist movements fueled by financing, the provision of weapons and strategy, and by attempts to justify these movements, even using the media. All these must be regarded as international crimes that threaten security and world peace. Such terrorism must be condemned in all its forms. You know, now, the good that religiously motivated people do, you know, there's bad things too, sexual abuse, you know, a small number. Case of the indigenous children in Canada, and Pope Francis went and apologized, but the good outweighs the evil. Think of it, the hospitals here, St. Francis, St. Mary in Waterbury, St. Raphael in New Haven, hospices, the Mayo Clinic. It was founded by Sisters of St. Francis, and they needed doctors, and they found a father and a son named Mayo. So instead of calling St. Francis, it's called the Mayo Clinic. But here, CRS, Catholic Police Services, we can be so proud of that. That's a group that goes outside of the United States. I was in Nicaragua a couple of years ago and saw what they did, you know, bringing water into a village where there was these two guys for a family had to take a ox-drawn cart for over 2 hours each way to fill a couple of barrels of water. Now they turn on the spigot, thanks to Catholic Relief Services. There's a school down the street in that same area, and they had latrines. The girls were getting sick. Then come CRS, they did go well. Now they have flush toilets. So we sort of laugh at that, but man, for people who've never had them, that's a big thing. Father Damien went and worked with the lepers and died with them in Molokai. Mother Teresa, everybody knows her. St. John of God, Portuguese born, and started working with the poorest people in Seville, Spain. And so on goes the list. Now, how to balance belief in God with love when there's so much misery in the world? That's a good objection. Well, your distinction between misery caused by humans, Hitler, Mao Zedong, Stalin, and natural disasters such as COVID. Well, I believe that God inspired those scientists to discover vaccines in a relatively short time so that the pandemic was overcome through human agency. God doesn't often work boom, here or there. Works through people, works through you, Jesus also entered our world and our society. Our God is not aloof. Nitty-gritty, and he paid the price. This beautiful quote from Paul Claudel, who was ambassador from Paris to Washington, D.C. He was also a mystic. He was a playwright, poet. And he said, Jesus didn't become man to explain suffering, nor to take it away, but to fill it with his presence. Think of that. In the book of Genesis, do we have a problem? Maybe if you'd like to ask a question about it. No, we have no problem at all. The book of Genesis is a theological book. The first 3 chapters, the creation of God, the creation of the universe, and all these things. Well, you have to be careful of this. People who go out and use the Bible as, going through all the numbers. There was a geologist, in quotes, he wasn't really a good geologist, but more of he was an Episcopalian. But he said that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. And then paleontologists come along and say, well, 1 million years, 4.3 billion years, But the Bible, Robert Bellarmine, he said, the Bible doesn't tell us how the heavens go, but how to go to heaven, And so we have but it teaches us that we're created by God, in God's image and likeness. We are brothers and sisters, all of us, and so on goes the list. So there's no problem. So I conclude, I know people are happy to hear that word. St. Augustine, who was a super genius, and who died in the year 540, he said in his Confessions, by the way, one of the most widely read spiritual books, "Late have I loved you, O beauty so old and so new. Late have I loved you," because he was searching, he didn't think that there was a God. You were with me, I was not with you. The lovely things kept me far from you, though if they did not have their existence in you, they would have had no existence at all. You called, you shouted, you broke through my deafness. You were radiant and resplendent, and you put to flight my blindness. You were fragrant, and I drew in my breath, and now I pant for you. I tasted you, and now I hunger and thirst for you. You touched me, and I burn for your peace. Amen. So if you have questions, I'd be glad to. And if I don't know the answer, give me your email. Yes, ma'am.
But this conversation, this talk is very helpful to my faith because as we age, we grow closer, well, even further or closer to what life is and what we can never truly understand in these bodies.
Right.
And so, yes, science is there. Science has helped us, but God is science. And God has helped us through our exploration of knowledge.
Yes, no question.
To come to Him. And so, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I truly appreciate it in my journey of faith.
Thank you, ma'am. And you're very right on that we owe the life that we're living today to science, you know, but also, as you said, you have to have that wonder and awe in God's presence, you know. And you're right, as you get older, it's like a scroll being unrolled, you know, or like a stage with a screen, you know, it's coming apart, the curtain comes apart. You discover more and more of yourself. I remember years ago, I was maybe in my early 50s, and this older bishop, he was 82 at the time, and I'm 88. He said, wait till your 80s, are the greatest years of your life. And there is something to that, you know, you got nothing to lose. But thank you, that's awe, wonder and awe in God's presence. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, science is a gift, like all other gifts, art,
Yes.
forms of art. Today, while I was in the car, I heard a portion of Vaughan Williams' Locke Ascending. It is a gorgeous piece of music. And, you know, I often think when I'm hearing music or seeing a great work of art, whether it be a painting or a sculpture or what have you, these are all gifts from God, and I thank God that He created Beethoven, or He,
Yes.
or you know, you have to appreciate all of this goodness. Science being one of the elements of.
That's beautiful. That fits in with the question of awe, too. You go and you see beautiful art, and there's something that it lifts your soul, you know, and music. I mean, like the finale of Mahler's Second Symphony, the Resurrection, or the Ninth, Beethoven's Ninth, but others too, you know. I always listen to beautiful, and it's much more than soothing. But God has gifted those people. Even I know the popes through the years have met with artists and composers, you know, to thank them for bringing God into their lives, even if it's not explicit. That's very good. Yeah, we need more than just everyday humdrum. I remember I was in the Philippines, and there was this slum, 120,000 people living there. And, you know, I got to meet some of the people. I was making a little sabbatical. And after that, I just yearned for a good art museum. You know, so it's to be able to rise up. Yes?
I've read Father Richard Rohr, who was a Franciscan, and the other day I was reading something that he was explaining that the artists of today are our prophets because they have opened themselves up to accept the gifts from God. And they are free thinking and forward thinking of many of us. And so I have a grandson who is an incredible artist, and I'm going to share that with him.
Beautiful.
Because he needs to understand he is a prophet.
Yeah, they're so in touch with themselves. You know, someone like Shakespeare, so in touch with himself, he could produce all those characters, but he never traveled at all. You know, he was so deep, the Dante, you know, the same thing, but yeah, you know, during the Vietnam War, the poetry that came out, the art that came out, yeah, that's very good. The prophets, we have to listen to them, you know. Yes, Mike.
This may be a little bit off topic, but how do you respond to someone who doubts the existence of God by looking around and seeing all the suffering?
Yeah, that's why I tried to talk about that too. That's the greatest objection, you know, why do children die? Remember Albert Camus, C-A-M-U-S, the great French writer, existentialist. But he had a dialogue with theologians, and he said that, you know, it's so hard to reconcile that with the fact that children die. People who suffer, who shouldn't suffer. In other words, they've done nothing wrong and all that. One of the greatest proofs to me is the way the Jews, during the Holocaust, in those prisons, kept their faith alive under the worst circumstances. You know? And as I said, that Jesus became one of us. He enmeshed himself in life, and he'd had a hard life, misunderstood, persecuted, and then finally arrested, falsely condemned to death, crucified, scourged, all those things. You know, but he rose from the dead to show us that there's another part of life beyond the bleakness, the evil, the suffering. You know, that's probably not much of an answer, but at least Christians can say that. Talk about Jesus, who, you know, he knows what it is. And that quote by Claudel, that Jesus became man, not to explain suffering or to take it away, but to fill it with his presence. It's hard to, I mean, people can be turned off because something evil happens to their family. You know, this family years ago in New Haven, when I lived there, their son dived into a lake to try to save a child that had fallen in. And he saved the child, but he drowned. And they were just turned off by that, you know. But on the other hand, it's hard, you can't talk to people rationally, they just want to hear it. But the only thing you can do is sympathize with them and say, I sympathize with you. You know, you can't say, well, you know, he's a hero. He was, obviously. Anyway. Yes.
In reference to the Jews during the Holocaust, they kept their life, the beauty of music to lift their lives. How they could play music and experience it so that they could live. I think that was a strong will of theirs.
Oh.
That any of the beauty that there was, they embraced it and celebrated it. So I just remember how they used to play music.
You know, no group that I know has suffered more than the Jews throughout the years, and yet, you know, some have gone away, they've become secular, but so many have stayed with it, you know, their deep faith in God. They got them through these things. was Erich Fromm. I think he was Jewish. He wrote that book, Man's Search for Meaning. In the late 50s, he had been also in the concentration camp, and he found that those who survived generally had something to live for. Some who wanted to go back and see their family, or others wanted to publish a book, or then to reach out to help others within the camp. That those are the ones who survived. And that idea of going out of ourselves, but based on faith, though. The faith of the wonderful Jewish people. Wow. Well, thank you for that. Yes?
I agree with you very much that there should be no conflict with science and religiosity. But can you comment a little bit on where the church hierarchy is after centuries of declaring heresy against scientists like Galileo and things that are happening today, even in the world of science? And that balance that's very difficult between the moral and the world of how people live today.
I can't speak for the hierarchy throughout the world, but it seems to me that our bishops would be aligned with the popes. John Paul II was very much in dialogue with scientists, as was Benedict, and then Pope Francis too. So I think we follow in the precepts. So we don't, for instance, if I had to make some kind of a determination, I would like to listen to people who are experts in the field first. And I think that's a general, that's what you call humility. You don't know it all. None of us is an Augustine or Thomas Aquinas, but you have to listen to people. For instance, when we were doing a pastoral letter on War and Peace, we listened to people from all these different backgrounds, from the government to nuclear scientists, and theologians too. And when we did the one on the economy, I was on that writing committee. We even heard from folks, farmers who lost their jobs, from several Nobel laureates, in order to try to get the economic part right, not just go off on the side and write theologically, but write theologically based on what we learned. Does that make sense? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Today, more than ever, it's political correctness for a lot of things. That seems to be a problem. Because what's politically correct is always morally correct.
Yeah.
I see that a lot with
Political correctness, woke. Yeah, I know, and some things you have to be careful too. Something that's new, like transgenderism, it's new, but we have to listen to people who are competent in that. I've been in touch with a psychiatrist at Yale who's very Catholic and has dealt with these and others. Just trying to think this thing through. And then you have to give things time also. Like the whole thing of taking stem cells from fetuses, and everybody's, we got to do this. It's going to be the panacea is going to answer the problems of people who are paraplegics and all this. Well, they found that, on the contrary, that it did more harm than good. So any good scientist would tell you that, though, too. You've got to go easy. You have to go, do a lot of experimentation, a lot of testing before you can come to some kind of conclusion or theory. Go easy. Chi va piano va sano e lontano Italian. People who go slowly, like the tortoise, you get there. Poco poco, little by little. Thank you for that.
I think it's the arts in general too, music and the arts, sculpture, painting, and everything. I think today, some people have a music position.
Oh,
I hear a lot of people, see what you think it is. It's difficult to tell them that it's really not music, because music has a definition.
yeah.
And it's rhythm.
With
I mean,
gentleman is a musician, and but you're competent in that area, and I'm not. And so you.
It bothers me that some people today think that this is music.
Yeah.
It's
Somebody said,
it's offensive.
yeah, some of it. He who marries the times will soon become a widower. No, that's age-old wisdom. Oh yeah, you gotta come with the times. Especially for younger people, because you don't see them, And we have to listen to the voice of the young, there's no question. Even Benedict said that, the saint, in his rule. You have to listen to the young monks too, But then you need perspective of life and wisdom, and wisdom only comes with getting old. I'm sorry, I don't know how else to say it. Okay. Rochelle, what do you think?
I think you're amazing. Are there any more questions before we wrap up? Well,
Beware, it's steady.
thank you. You're welcome. Before I release you to our Ben and Jerry's truck out back behind me, I just want to tell you about the next 2 weeks of this lecture series. So next Thursday, July 20th, we'll be over at St. Thomas in the lower chapel, and Father Moran will be speaking on the genius of Jesus. And I think probably everybody here knows he's an amazing speaker as well. So it should be very interesting. And he's going to be showing a clip from The Chosen, which I don't know if you've seen, but I've heard wonderful things about it. So that should be very interesting. And then the following week, I hope is interesting because it's mine, Father Dolan asked me if I could teach you how to sing. And I don't think that's going to be very hard. But on the 27th here at St. Tim's, I will be giving a lighthearted group singing lesson. And so if you have trouble hitting the high notes or the low notes of hymns, we're going to talk about that in a general sense. And then my cantors are going to give some demonstrations. So it should be really fun. So again, thank you, Bishop Peter, and please join us for our back.
You're a wonderful